In 1915, Nikola Tesla gave an interview that was never supposed to survive. He talked about the devil. The interview was pulled, the publication buried it, and for decades, almost no one knew it existed. But here's what makes this story different from every other Tesla conspiracy theory. Tesla left proof, not in the way people expected, but in his notes, his patents, and in the documents the FBI seized from his hotel room the night he died. The question was never really whether Tesla was a genius. The question is what that genius actually uncovered, and why the people around him worked so hard to make sure the world never found out. But first, I need you to quickly understand who he really was. And almost nobody remembers him correctly. By 1895, Tesla's alternating current system had just been chosen to power the Niagara Falls hydroelectric project. For the first time in history, electricity would travel hundreds of miles from a single source. The entire modern power grid, everything you plug in today, runs on a system Tesla designed in the 1880s. But Tesla wasn't just an engineer. He believed electricity was a window into something deeper, something that connected all living things. He rarely slept more than 2 hours a night. He claimed his best ideas didn't come from calculation. They arrived fully formed, like transmissions. He would see a complete invention in his mind, rotating in 3 dimensions before he ever touched a pencil. Most people called that genius. Tesla called it something else. He said he was receiving information. His contemporaries laughed at that idea. But then he predicted wireless communication, designed the first remote-controlled vehicle, and outlined the basic concept of radar, decades before anyone else. By 1900, the pressure had become unbearable. His laboratory had burned down, his funding was drying up, and J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker in America, had just pulled his financial support for Tesla's most ambitious project, the Wardenclyffe Tower. That's when Tesla started to change. And that's when the strange reports began. Most people know Tesla as the man who built the future. What they don't know is that one night in Colorado, the future contacted him back. It was 1899. Tesla had retreated to Colorado Springs specifically because the altitude and dry air made large-scale electrical experiments easier. He was attempting something no scientist had tried before, transmitting electrical signals through the earth itself, not through wires, through the ground beneath your feet. One night, while monitoring his equipment alone, Tesla recorded something unexpected. His receivers picked up a repeating signal, rhythmic, structured, not random atmospheric noise, not interference from his own equipment, something that followed a pattern. Tesla wrote about this moment with unusual language for a scientist. He described the signal as intelligent. He later told journalists, carefully, cautiously, that he believed he had intercepted a communication that did not originate from any human source. The scientific community dismissed it immediately, but Tesla never walked that claim back. In a 1901 article in Collier's Weekly, he wrote that the signals were real, ordered, and their origin remained unexplained. He stopped short of naming what he thought sent them, but in private correspondence recovered decades later, he was less careful with his words. He wrote that whatever contacted him that night in Colorado Springs had shown him things he wished he could unsee. That was 1899. By 1915, he would finally describe what those things were. Here's the part of the Tesla story that almost every documentary gets wrong. And once you understand it correctly, everything else falls into place. When Tesla used the word devil in that 1915 interview, he wasn't describing a creature. He was describing a system. Tesla had spent years studying what he called the forces of destruction, not supernatural forces, but human ones. The mechanisms by which power, money, and information were used to crush anything that threatened the established order. But the interview went further than that. Tesla described a specific encounter. He said that during his Colorado Springs experiments, at the peak of his isolation, something had made itself known to him. He described it as a presence that communicated not through sound, but through direct understanding. And what it communicated was a warning. The warning was this: humanity was being deliberately kept from certain knowledge. The suppression wasn't accidental. There were forces, He used the word intelligences, actively working to ensure that free energy, wireless transmission, and certain frequencies would never reach the public. Tesla believed those forces were partly human, but partly something he could not explain within the framework of science. That distinction matters, because Tesla was not a mystic. He was one of the most rigorous experimental scientists who ever lived. For him to use language like this, in an interview, on record, was extraordinary. But then the interview disappeared. The publication never ran the piece. The journalist who wrote it never spoke publicly about what Tesla had said. The only surviving fragments came from a secondary source who had been present in the room. Tesla later said the suppression of that interview was itself the proof. If what he said wasn't dangerous, he argued, nobody would have bothered to bury it. Tesla didn't make powerful enemies by being difficult. He made them by being right. J.P. Morgan had invested heavily in copper wire infrastructure. Tesla's wireless transmission system would have made that infrastructure worthless overnight. Thomas Edison had built an empire on direct current. Tesla's alternating current made it obsolete. These weren't just professional rivalries, they were financial wars. Edison ran a public campaign to discredit alternating current, electrocuting animals in public demonstrations to prove it was dangerous. But Morgan played a quieter, more effective game. He withdrew funding from Wardenclyffe Tower mid-construction. No warning, no negotiation, just silence, knowing that without capital, the project would collapse and Tesla with it. But beyond the business interests, something more organized was happening. In 1909, a coordinated series of articles appeared in major publications questioning Tesla's mental stability. Not his science, his mind. This is a classic suppression pattern. When you can't disprove someone's ideas, you discredit the person. By 1915, the year of the banned interview, Tesla had been systematically stripped of funding, laboratory space, and public credibility. He was living in the Hotel New Yorker, running up debts, largely forgotten by mainstream science. But he kept working, and he kept talking, which meant the people who wanted him silent had to keep working too. Several of Tesla's patent applications from 1910 to 1920 were delayed, rerouted, or quietly denied, with no official explanation on record. Someone was paying very close attention. Nikola Tesla died alone on January 7, 1943. But what happened in the hours after his death is the part of this story most people have never heard. He was 86 years old, living in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker. No money, no colleagues, no family nearby. And within hours of his death, the United States government moved in. The FBI, working under the Office of Alien Property, seized every document in Tesla's room, every notebook, every blueprint, every letter. The official reason was that Tesla may have been working on technology relevant to the war effort, but Tesla had been largely inactive for years. The seizure happened too fast and too completely to be routine. A government official named John G. Trump, an MIT physicist and the uncle of Donald Trump, was brought in to review the materials. His official report concluded that Tesla's papers contained nothing of significant scientific value. That report has always been considered suspicious by Tesla researchers, because we know what Tesla was working on. His dynamic theory of gravity, an unpublished framework that directly challenged Einstein's model, was referenced in letters but never found among the seized documents. His research into scalar waves and longitudinal electromagnetic transmission disappeared entirely. What did survive were fragments, secondary copies held by colleagues, a partial manuscript recovered in the 1980s from a storage facility in New Jersey. Those fragments described a unified field of energy connecting all matter, a transmission system requiring no physical infrastructure, and repeated references, oblique but consistent, to the Colorado Springs signal. In one recovered note, Tesla wrote, "What I received was not random. What I built was not theoretical. What was taken from me was not accidental." 3 sentences, but they point in one direction. Here is the detail that changes how you see everything Tesla said. The ideas that got him labeled unstable in 1915 are now foundational to modern physics. Wireless energy transmission, the concept Morgan helped destroy, is now being actively developed by MIT, Samsung, and the U.S. Department of Energy. Tesla's research into resonant frequency and its effect on physical matter directly predicted what we now call resonance therapy, used in modern medical equipment. His theoretical work on longitudinal waves, dismissed as nonsense in his lifetime, maps almost precisely onto concepts in quantum field theory developed 50 years after his death. The Schumann resonance, the measurable electromagnetic frequency of the Earth itself, matches almost exactly the frequency Tesla was working with in Colorado Springs in 1899. He wasn't imagining the signal. He was measuring something real that science wouldn't have the tools to confirm for another half-century. Which raises one final question. If Tesla was right about the science, what else was he right about? Tesla didn't lose his mind at the end of his life. He lost his funding, his laboratory, and his reputation, all of them taken deliberately by people who understood exactly what he had built. The banned interview, the seized documents, the suppressed patents, none of it was accidental. Tesla knew that. And he said so clearly in 1915, in the interview nobody was supposed to read. The devil he described wasn't supernatural. It was systemic. And if you look at how the world actually works, it's hard to argue he was wrong.